We all are living in the digital age and the proliferation of technology and social media, and it really accelerated the pace of the concept of one's personal brand. We are out there in the digital space, kind of with the ability to access and share with millions of other people potentially, and with that additional visibility and exposure, that the notion of a brand becomes really highly relevant, because the brand is an external expression of a person, a thought, a product. It's what we put out there. And so when we have this arena of opportunities to share and receive information, the brand, because of the external facing nature of it, becomes really, really important. So technology sort of accelerated things, and everyone thinks they can, and build a brand, and people are trying, and we're here to help kind of guide them do that intentionally and strategically, and really to achieve the greatest positive impact that they can. When we can connect emotionally with people, give them something to react to, respond to, that makes them feel something, that's when those connections can really, from a psychological standpoint, really be cemented or stickier, and we can connect with them. We want to connect with them, and it's really critical when we are that leader sharing our brand, that we do so in a way that's authentic, that shows some vulnerability, that we're not perfect, right, but that we're a real person, and that it really accelerates the ability for others to connect with us in a meaningful way.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the All Innovation, the AI podcast. I'm incredibly excited because we have a true thought leader here with us today, someone who is the founder of an amazing brand. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about our guest, Laura Barnard. So she is the former co-captain of the Harvard women's basketball team. She is the current founder of BREAKTHRU Brands. Now, BREAKTHRU Brands in itself is an innovative leadership development solution focused on advancing equitable representation of leaders around the world. Thank you so much for being here, Laura. We really appreciate it.
Keenan, Dante, it's great to be here with you both. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man. So welcome to the All Innovation podcast. We always talk about innovation in two lanes, because first is innovation of technology, but the second is innovation in thought. And this is where I'm really excited to be able to kind of hear your perspective and everything that you've accomplished and how you're helping push leaders towards a new recognition of what brand means today. But before we start to get into that, I want to ask you a question that came from our last guest. The last guest said, if you've ever played sports, you truly understand the importance of accountability. What is one lesson that accountability taught you through sports? And then how do you leverage that in your business today?
Good one. Great question. I think so. Accountability, quick definition setting, I guess, from my perspective, is very simply doing what you said you're going to do, or doing what you say you will do. So kind of fulfilling that promise to others. And I think in sports, especially in a team sport like basketball, where you maybe have a play set up or a certain defense that you're running, and you say you're going to be at a certain spot on the floor at a certain time, you better be there to catch the ball or pass the ball, whatever your role might be. So it comes into practice really in an every moment to moment basis on the basketball court. And then, from a teamwork standpoint, being there for your teammates. You mentioned way back in the day as a co-captain of that team now 20 plus years ago. You can show accountability no matter where your spot is on the bench or on the floor. So, from being that first year, not really knowing, who I was or what kind of player I'd be or what type of person I was going to emerge as at that young age, to really rising up through the ranks and kind of showing that accountability to others from a leadership standpoint became really important to me. But you learn it in really small ways in the course of action on the basketball court.
I just love the fact that sports teaches us so many important lessons. And the one thing I love about you being a co-captain of the basketball team is you're responsible not only for your own actions, but lifting others around you. I saw a post this morning on LinkedIn that was talking about great leaders or good leaders push themselves to be better. Great leaders push their teams to be better, but phenomenal leaders push each other to want to be better. And it's an interesting perspective. And I feel like you have so many of those life lessons that you've experienced. I know Dante and myself both played sports growing up. And it's just like, it's so cool to see how those things translated from the field into real life. And before we started recording here today, we started talking about 8th place trophies and kind of the position of that. And so we can dive into that a little bit later. But let's get into the episode. Dante, take us away.
Yeah, as we get into this, Laura, I'm curious if someone's kind of scrolling through social media and they find this episode and click on it, what are some of the highlights you feel that they're going to take away from this conversation, or that you hope they take away?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and this is kind of the premise of our work and of my book is, and what I would want anyone to sort of feel and take away is that everybody has the ability and the capacity to lead, not just those with the title or with authority, and unlocking that belief inside of all of us and the motivation within us to lead and to, be the best version of ourselves out there, professionally, personally, sort of in all the circles that we run in, that would be what I'd want people to feel.
So, what do we think is going on in the world of brand today? And why do you think Brands is filling a necessary gap in the marketplace? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, well, I think it's really been fascinating. We all are living in the digital, digital age and the proliferation of technology and social media, and it really accelerated the pace of the concept of one's personal brand. We are out there in the digital space, kind of with the ability to access and share with millions of other people potentially, and with that additional visibility and exposure, that the notion of a brand becomes really highly relevant because the brand is an external expression of a person, a thought, a product. It's what we put out there. And so when we have this arena of opportunities to share and receive information, the brand, because of the external facing nature of it, becomes really, really important. So technology, kind of that dual edged sword, it sort of accelerated things, and everyone thinks they can, and build a brand, and people are trying, and we're here to help kind of guide them do that intentionally and strategically, and really to achieve the greatest positive impact that they can.
It's a really interesting time to me to kind of think about how important brand has become. Because when you think about consumer behavior today, the first thing we do is look for the individuals behind the brand and see if they are stand up people instead of just the cloak of the brand like PepsiCo or something like that. We're always looking for that human connection. And I feel like maybe there's a little bit of misstep that's happening in the world today where people aren't recognizing that everything you put onto the internet is a digital footprint that will follow you for the rest of time. And so thinking about brand, I feel like is incredibly important for us, especially as we navigate the next couple of years of everything that's happening in the technology space.
Absolutely. I think, we often say too, your digital presence precedes you. I think, if you're about to interview for something or be considered for a conversation opportunity, people are most likely going to search you up, right? And whether it's Google or LinkedIn or whatever social platform you're on, that digital presence is often going to precede the real life version of you. So we ask people, how are you showing up? What are you putting out there? What are the stimuli that people are receiving? Your words, your decisions, your actions, the visual, all these things that come together to create a cohesive brand identity. Those are all those touch points, and there's tons of them. They're prolific. It's out there. So can we intentionally show up in the best way possible? We can't control everything, but we can definitely curate and establish guardrails for ourselves.
I remember just my personal little anecdote is back when I was in paid advertising. I would do paid advertising for some large corporations, and I would always see such a difference when we use the brand's name or like a personal face, like a person that's behind the brand, whether that's like the CEO, the founder. I'm curious your perspective on creating like a big brand, right? Like a kind of faceless brand compared to a personal brand. What's been your experience?
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up a good point, Dante. Even, if we have a product or company, when we can see, the face or the person sort of behind that thing, or that place or that organization, and really have some sort of emotional connection to it, we have, brand affinity it develops, brand love can develop. We follow and want to consume and have that brand be a part of our lives. Think about, for me, a basketball player loving the Nike brand, right? I've connected over the years through the brand ambassadors out there in the world, the faces, the stories, the Michael Jordans back in the day, of sharing the story of the brand and kind of bring it to life for people. And I think, Keenan, you mentioned too, the brands that have, are, values based or have a mission that we can connect with. Those are the ones that really cement their place in our hearts and our minds. And the same thing applies to people and their brands. When we can connect emotionally with people, give them something to react to respond to that makes them feel something. That's when those connections can really, from a psychological standpoint, really be cemented or stickier, and we can connect with them. We want to connect with them, and it's really critical when we are that leader sharing our brand that we do so in a way that's authentic, that shows some vulnerability, that we're not perfect, right? But that we're a real person, and that it really accelerates the ability for others to connect with us in a meaningful way.
What is your brand, Laura?
Oh, no one's ever asked me that. Geez, this is no. I often think about this, practicing what I preach. Right, we part of our work at Breakthrough. We're a small but mighty team of six, and each of us on the team has gone through our own what we call brand unlock engagement project exercise. So what we do with our clients, we do for ourselves and with ourselves. So we get to go through the experience of our clients and kind of pressure test things. And so if my brand in a word is really about empowerment, and specifically for me, that means about giving people strength and confidence to lead. And that's really my North Star, sort of driving my brand, the decisions I make, my words, where I show up, all those things. It's the guiding force that kind of determines how I'm showing up for people and in spaces. And that's really try to keep it simple there, but it's about empowerment.
My question is, why empowerment? Because, from the outside looking in, Harvard grad, doing all this amazing stuff, athlete, you have so many elements of your personality, but also your persona. Why is empowerment something that's so important to you?
Yeah, I think being, very transparent and try to be candid here. It's coming from a place of privilege. From my perspective, being a white person in this society, having access to education, sports, mental health, all these things are positive tailwinds for me. And I've had a lot of worked hard, but I've also had a ton of advantages because of those things. And to be in a place where I can apply my skill set, my passion, my knowledge, my curiosity about the things I've gotten exposure to, the things I've learned about leadership, about brands, about developing others, about being on teams. I've had access to all those things, and if I can share that with others to help them lead better, more productive, more effective, more impactful lives, I think that's really what's motivating me to do that.
So when we talk about a little bit about your history, right? So you have a background in psychology and brand marketing. Can you tell us about the initiation story? Like, what was the driving force behind wanting to start Breakthrough Brands?
Yeah. So really the seed of it really is this curiosity about psychology, specifically kind of social psychology, leadership psychology, and psychology is really just about trying to understand ourselves and others better. What motivates our decisions, our actions, our behaviors. And I was always, since my high school days, really interested in that academic topic. But then very quickly, how can I apply that to whether it's in sports or in school or then my professional lives? And it was a very useful tool with a lot of applicability. My two greatest teachers of psychology, I'll go back to those folks. One was my social psychology kind of mentor at Harvard. He's passed away, unfortunately, but his name was Richard Hackman. Amazing thought leader in the team dynamic space, and really he was keenly studying sports teams, so we had that overlap. He was a former basketball player, and Richard Hackman, in conjunction with my basketball coach at Harvard, Kathy Delaney Smith, who, among other things, is also a psychology expert, although she's reluctant to say that, but really learning from these two great minds in very different spaces, one on the court, one in the classroom, about how to leverage the power of psychology for good and to help teams, and others perform better and collectively achieve more. And I, always kind of I went into business for 20 years, so I kind of took that psychology application into the business world, and did brand management, as you mentioned, and kind of climbed the ladder corporately for some large global iconic brands, and learned a ton. Achieved the promotions, got up higher on the ladder, and as I rose to the top as head of marketing for global brands we all know and love, I was missing something that was really important, and that was a sense of purpose. And really, I had been so accomplishment oriented and sort of goal driven, which we all are, the athlete mentality, right? And I kind of lost track of that purpose piece. And in 2019, kind of with some readiness to make a change in my career and kind of look at that next, the next phase, as I was not getting any younger, let's just say, really seeking out, what could I do with this privilege I have, with this skill set, with this education, with this knowledge, about brands, about leaders, and also the lived experience of being a female LGBTQ executive in corporate America, having been developed as a leader and kind of seeing those limitations, kind of putting that together and saying, okay, is there a solution here to help advance underrepresented leaders like myself in leadership through the lens of the brand of the leader? And could I start working with folks to help them sort of individually and kind of prototype it a little bit, and then grow it into the business that it is today, where we're working with large groups and organizations to really specifically build the personal leadership brands of folks to help elevate them, develop them, retain them, amplify their voice. And that's been the journey over the last 5 years. But it was really trying to figure out what to do with this energy and the passion and apply it towards something with greater purpose.
I feel like that's so powerful. I want to kind of dive into the early days of, having a 9 to 5 and being incredibly successful, and then making the shift towards entrepreneurship and trading in that 9 to 5 for a 24/7, 365. That in itself is a pretty scary process. And we've all been through that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I want to know, what were the initial days like? What was 0 to 1 like? Because you realize that you've got all this understanding of what brand and the power behind it. So who are the first couple people, or who's your first like customer who you got to buy into this belief of how you can help curate their brand?
Yeah. I think in the early days, I'll mess up the famous quote, but like most of these, the success in the world is like 1% idea, 99% execution. So had a great idea. What if I could build the brands of these leaders who are having an impact in the world, and then just sitting down in front of my computer thinking, how the hell am I going to do this and operationalize it? And don't even talk about scaling it. Didn't even know what that word meant 5 years ago. So kind of getting real simple, hands-on, like I need to start somewhere, like that first prototype, the guinea pig, if you will, the test case. So when I had sort of crystallized the concept of what I wanted to do to help these leaders, I often, as I do, I reach out to my mentors, whether it be my father, or in this case, I reached out to Kathy, my coach from Harvard, and I called her and I said, I had this concept, this idea of helping build the brands of leaders, and I would love to help you. And she kind of laughed at me, and she said, my brand, like, what are you talking about? I'm a basketball coach, kind of laughed me off. I said, no, hear me out. And I, just crazy idea. So she was very open-minded, willing, clearly felt my passion about what I was envisioning. And that was really the first experience for me of really helping someone really from A to Z, deep discovery into purpose, mission, vision, values, sort of unpacking this person who I'd known for 20 years, but really getting deeper into why she was a basketball coach, and why she was obsessed with leadership, and why she was obsessed also with empowerment, and just understanding her really deeply to then be able to build a strategy for her, and then ultimately over time help her establish a platform and really activate her brand off the court once she retired now 2 years ago. So this sort of evolution of discovery into strategy into activation is a simplified version of the work that we do today on a scaled basis through a product offering with now hundreds and now soon thousands of leaders. But Kathy was sort of patient zero, and we learned a lot from that experience.
So cool.
She should be the next guest on your show. We'll have her on your show.
if you hook it up, we'll definitely.
I don't know
have
about
her.
innovation and AI, but you would love her.
Yeah, definitely. So this topic of founder-led marketing, leader-led marketing is something that's becoming more of a buzzword, especially in the marketing community, because we see how powerful it can be when the face of an organization is actually being a thought leader and being more active on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious, what have you seen as far as the power of what you do when it comes to dollars and cents, right? You talked a little bit about it could be used as a retention tool to keep top leaders, can be used as a tool to sharpen the voice of the organization as well. I'm curious, what are some of the other aspects that we should be looking at?
Yeah, great question. And I think, I always like to practice what we're preaching here, and kind of, if I'm coaching and consulting and guiding folks to do this, as a founder, am I doing enough of this? Am I putting ideas out there, casting a vision, putting thought leadership out there, proprietary models, put your thinking into words, all those things. So a lot of it hopefully translates into revenue, right, for our business. But from a corporate perspective, it's a good question. We get asked it a lot when we work with a large company through the leadership development group or human resources or people development, et cetera. We talk about 3 or 4, depending on the group, but major key people indicators. KPIs is key performance. We talk about key people indicators. We talk about retention, visibility, mobility, and agency. And so, those things can all, for each company, sort of be very specifically quantified, and we kind of hone in on whatever their pain point might be. So if they have a retention issue specifically, and we're talking about tends to be like middle to upper middle management, so folks who are rising up within the organization, and we put the lens of representation on this. So again, that's going to be organizational, dependent on the organization, I should say, whether what is the needle that they want to move. So we look at their metrics, what matters to them, what their pain point is, and then one of those 4, we believe that our work can sort of turn up the dial on and help them with. So it's going to be a little bit different for each company based on where they're at and the problems that they're trying to solve.
Let's talk a little bit about breaking the mindset of brand. So one of the things that I recognize is about, legacy leaders often looked at as the brand of IBM or PepsiCo or their large brand, which was something that was kind of like an impenetrable force field, if you will. Mm-hmm. But now that we've gotten into this social media realm, I recognize that each individual, like you've said, has the ability to contribute to the brand, good or bad. Mm-hmm. So are there any type of hesitancies or any type of like belief systems that you have to break in order to get these leaders to buy into why brand is so important for them, but also for the company as a whole?
It's a great question. And I think if I go back in my own career, coming out of college in 2002, so now 20 years, a lot of data points to look at here. Back in the day, it was definitely, you went and signed a contract to go work for a company, and you were the ambassador for that corporate brand. Whether you go on, in my case, a lot of people go to work for the consulting firms or the banks or whatever, and like you became sort of consumed or subsumed by that corporate entity, and you were the dark side of it, the cog in the wheel, but you were sort of under that umbrella, and you really didn't seek out nor were you encouraged to have a voice outside of those sort of corporate communications guidelines. I worked, friends who went off to, Google, you became a Googler. I went off to Mars Wrigley. I was a Martian, and that these kind of the vernacular that pops up around where you work and sort of how that guides how you're showing up for others was very strong. It has kind of flipped a lot. I would say almost complete 180 here, other direction, where the leader is, out there as an ambassador, a brand on their own, and it halos back to the organization. And the forward-thinking organizations, many of which we are fortunate to collaborate with, want their leaders to be externally facing. They want the brand of that leader internally to the company is critical for them to get things done and to be influential and well liked and impactful. But then externally, they want them, on panels, speaking, writing, sharing about all the amazing things that they're doing at that company, the forward-thinking things that they're doing to help it halo back and actually benefit the brand. In a very practical sense, we've worked with, take a law firm, for example. If they have a rising partner or a partner who they want to spotlight, they want that person out there sharing their ideas, sharing their perspectives, sort of billboarding the amazing work that they're. For us, see that reversal over time of the person relative to the corporate brand, it has flipped, and it's pretty powerful. And the companies, I think, are encouraging it and grasping it and developing that and intentionally are going to benefit for sure from a marketing standpoint.
Do you feel like there's any type of, I would say, expected consumer behavior that expects the people of a brand to be visible? I'll give you an example. So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I talk to a lot of guys who are in the med device sales industry, right? Strikers, the big med techs, the huge companies. And it's interesting to me that some of the most powerful brands from a personal perspective have almost been silenced or tried to be smothered by some of those large brands. I've had a couple friends who have worked for Stryker. They've had like followings of like 35,000, 100,000 followers. And it is the follower count that was the end up demise of their career at that organization. They get fired because like, you're not in compliance, you're creating too much noise. I wonder where, from a brand expert perspective, you think that mindset comes from. Is it a lack of trust for those individuals? Is it almost like a jealousy? Is it almost like a trade of, you're building your own personal brand off of what we've created here as a large brand like Stryker? What's your kind of 2 cents on an organization who smothers somebody who's, out there in front of the brand?
Yeah, I mean, the what you're describing does not sound good in my humble opinion. And my initial reaction from the psychology standpoint is about a scarcity mindset. So it sounds like some of these corporations have that scarcity mindset where because perhaps their time as they're seeing it, or their resources are going into this person and their personal brand, that it's taking away from the company's time and resources, when really it's additive, and it can increase and the visibility and exposure of that individual and their success can and should be translated into the corporation's success if it's done transparently and with conversation and intentionality. And I think that's where we see the opportunities when we work with an organization. The work is individually focused, but the hiring, or the manager or the CEO in some cases is also seeing the work to understand, what's in his or her arsenal of leaders, and how their brands can sort of help be, again, these ambassadors, these activation points out in the world. So we share the work. We want to co-create it, with the C-suite. If we're working with a bunch of directors, for example, we want the C-suite to see what we're doing with these directors from a personal brand standpoint, to help them really understand the full suite of potential that's really I won't say at their disposal, but that they can leverage to help drive the business objectives. So I think can be definitely that mutuality. That individual can have that agency, have that visibility, put themselves out there, and it can, again, halo back to the corporate brand. But there has to be the scarcity mentality and mindset has to go away, and there has to be that more of an abundance mindset about it.
I'm curious if anyone's listening and they're like, hey, this sounds great. I really want to get into personal branding and having ambassadors for my company. Where would be a good place? Obviously, you have your own frameworks and process, but where would be a good place to start? And then two, how do you toe the line between the company's mission and staying authentic to whoever the ambassador is as a person?
Yeah, great question. So the easy one, kind of the very first step on the journey that we guide folks on to building their personal leadership brand is understanding who they are as a leader, and kind of getting clear self-awareness, self-reflection. And we do that through our leadership types model. And there's a book available, which makes it nice and easy and digestible, but it's just leadershiptypes.com. You can go there and get some resources and get started on that part of the brand building journey. And then the more complicated parts of the strategizing and the work would follow step by step after that. Sort of the connection between the mission of the company and the individuals, agencies, that the question, Dante, in terms of maybe some tension there, some conflict there.
Yeah, how do you toe the line between really fulfilling what the brand wants as far as desires? Yeah. The word out, but then the personal side of the brand ambassador wanting to be authentic to their voice and things that they want to talk about.
Yeah, that's a tough one. In the perfect world, what is feels right and good and authentic to that individual, there is some intersection with what is the mission of the company, and if there's complete misalignment. So I stand for, and I want to talk about, my values are based in this area, and the companies across the room on the other side in that area. That's a problem. We try to find those points of intersection where there's either from a values perspective or a mission or the origin story of the company, the products they sell. There's something in that universe that intersects with something that's really deeply meaningful to you, authentically meaningful to you, that you can talk about and share about with information, with pride, with all those things. So we want to find those points of intersection. And when there's a complete disconnect, we're not telling people, quit your job, leave the company, but that's something to assess. And that, because when there's a complete disconnect, it can feel very isolating. It can feel frustrating. It can be confusing. And I've been there, done that, where I've worked in places where that was not in alignment, where I couldn't be my authentic self, didn't really buy into the full mission, and that's an opportunity to look elsewhere.
I want to pivot into kind of a scary topic for a lot of
Okay.
people, which is vulnerability. So, one of the things that I recognize about social media today is it seems like everybody's in a race to copy and paste other traits from people and then put them on ourselves. And it
Mhm.
seems like it's so difficult for so many people to create their own personal brand today because they're scared to actually be vulnerable about their thoughts, their opinions, and just being themselves naturally. And I feel like that's where a lot of connection comes from. So, I want you to kind of talk about the dichotomy, or as Dante said, towing the line between wanting to be what everybody else wants, but the benefit of also being authentically yourself and vulnerable about your own opinions and things like that, and how that plays into the bigger brand picture of yourself and even for your company.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think vulnerability. I think where we sort of start that. The Brene Brown has a definition. The school of thought. There's always different versions, and some people love the word, some people hate the word. I like the word. I think it's just about really being kind of like like open heart, open mind, all those things. And so I can kind of, in a way, answer the question by just explaining how we sort of crack that open for our clients. It's a hard part, and it's we talk about breakthrough. The metaphor of like breaking through barriers, and that internal barrier to getting to that vulnerable place is the hardest one to sort of break down and break through. Um, we start, with in our discovery process with getting very simple, getting to know the person and having them share their story or their personal narrative. And if they give us, we don't want their resume, we don't want their LinkedIn, um, we don't want nice and neat, tidy bullets. We want to know like what makes them unique, what makes them special, what hard things have they gone through, what good decisions, bad decisions, these milestone marker moments in the spaghetti string of our story, and we kind of try to find the through line of what is kind of the consistent, the guiding force, and hopefully upward forward trajectory through that story. But we want to understand the peaks and the valleys of that. And in that exercise, people come into this work thinking, and it is leadership development, but there it gets very deep and very emotional. And a lot of the psychology of this comes through in those, or the psychological aspects of it, I should say, come through when we have people share their story. And so we, we'll play back to them what we heard, which is an exercise in and of itself. This is what we heard. Here are the attributes that we've detected of you as a person, as a leader. And by the way, we've also interviewed 4 of your key stakeholders in your life, your champions who know you best, who can articulate your strengths, those attributes, those opportunities, and they are vision casting for you. And here's what they said. And so through it, that's kind of our tools, our efforts to sort of break through that shell, if you will, to get them to a place where they are willing to share, they are vulnerable, and then convincing them, guiding them to say people need to hear what you have to say, and say it this way, not that way, and make sure you hit these points. We'll guide them, we'll filter. We'll edit, because that's the big thing. People are information overload, so we'll help them edit how to share that in a way that they're comfortable, that's authentic to them, but that does kind of show their hand a little bit in terms of that vulnerability again. And that's once they're able to do that, that's when they're going to be able to facilitate emotional connections with those on their team and their organization. In the broader social media universe, right? We have to share those things that make us real, and it requires that vulnerability. So it's a really integral part, a critical first step in the broader process, but it's not easy.
I
I'm
mean, it sounds
curious.
like it'd be incredibly scary. Sorry,
It's
Dante.
it
Go
is,
ahead.
it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to do it with you, Keenan. Can't wait to see what's in it. But it's like we gotta go, we gotta figure it out and get to it. It's people that collaborate with us, they're putting a lot of trust in us to even go down that path, because most people just avoid it and don't want to go there. So
I'm curious, as you were speaking, I'm like, I got to hear part of your story going through your own profit process, because a lot of what you've been saying is, hey, I eat my own dog food, right? Like I
yeah,
do my own process. I live the work.
yeah,
And so when we're talking about making the transition from, an employee, very successful employee, and then going to work for yourself, building this company, Breakthrough Brands, what has been some of the things, maybe internally or externally, that you felt that you've broken through? Trying to
Yeah.
share your own journey and share your own story.
Yeah. Yeah, think about in our leadership types model, we have 12 different leadership types that we've identified. They're leadership archetypes. And if I go back to those brand manager days, kind of junior associate rising up the ranks in a large corporation, um, combined with my basketball player sort of mentality and background, I was very much a connector, like a social manager, social aspiring leader, all about connection. So I was what we would call the connector type. And interestingly, the type that's opposite that on our leadership types wheel is by by the design of the model opposite from a motivation standpoint. So it's not about disconnecting and making people happy. It's about having a little bit more sense of ego, and ego is not a bad thing. We need ego to express and create and to step into my opposite type, which is actually about being more visionary. And that's about bringing things to life that maybe only exist in imagination and kind of making the intangible, making it tangible, that idea of realizing things and creating something, which I was not ready to do 5 years ago is when I started to get ready, but 10 years ago, I was not in that space. And I think that for me, um, getting over my own, negative self-talk, self-doubt. I can't do that. I can't start a company. No one would want to hear what I have to say. Like all those things that creep in. Um, it was interesting for me to see this tool, this leadership types tool come to life and say, okay, actually, I needed to stretch and grow in a pretty remarkably different way to be in a position to start this company, to think differently about problem solving in the world, and to now be able to say, okay, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to create a proprietary model. I'm going to have conversations like this, sharing my ideas clearly, hopefully, confidently. And that evolution has taken place in the last 5 years for sure. It was in me, but I was sort of like suppressing it a little bit. And this kind of idea of stepping into your full power, that has taken time. It's taken my career of experience. It's taken the support of others around me, that encouragement. But then the shift in thinking really that has happened in the last 5 years is really what gave me the courage to take the leap, but then gave me some framework in terms of how to step into that and now being this visionary founder is made me very uncomfortable at first to even talk like that, but I need to put that out there in order to collaborate and have the impact that I know my team and I want to have in the world.
It's wild as you were talking there, I was thinking about Dante had a mentor when we were younger, a guy named Sam Evans, who was very successful, owned a website called consulting.com. And he released a training that talked about basically what got you here won't get you there. And he was using the polarizing example of somebody like Donald Trump as an example. Everybody's got their own opinion about this guy, but he was also the president of the United States, and he's also a billionaire. And so when people talk about, some of the things that we don't have, it's often our natural instinct to look at people who we don't like and say, I would never be like that individual. But as I heard you kind of talking about you being the connector piece to being the visionary, you had to very much become the other version of yourself who you kind of honestly didn't want to become. And it's a very interesting process of personal growth and recognizing that we have to obtain certain attributes that we might not always look at as being positive in order to get to the next position. Does that make sense?
Totally. And as you're talking, Keenan, I was thinking, and I've been sort of grappling with this concept and subject about like the tension in our lives, and tension is not a bad thing. Tension is an energizing force. Without tension, a tightrope walker cannot walk across that rope from point A to point B. You need that tension, and I think in more matrix organizations, corporate roles, kind of one of many on these big global teams, I was always at tension, like, well, I could do this. Someday I'm going to start a company. I'm really an entrepreneur at heart, but here I am in this big company or part of the team always, and super collaborative, super cooperative, agreeable, affable, all the things. But I wasn't fully realizing my full potential. And that tension, it manifests, I'll say, when I took the leap and started the company. And I still feel it every day. Like, am I doing the right thing? Did I make the right decision? And I know I did. It doesn't mean it's easy, but when we have these tensions in our life, or these things where, you're kind of pulled in an opposite direction, or you have this sort of opposing thought, that's exploring that. There's opportunity in that. There's growth in that. It's not a bad thing. I think, from a team dynamic perspective, people who are maybe so different from you in how they're leading and what, how they're thinking, that can create tension or conflict in a meeting. But that's actually a positive thing. We want to explore that and delve into that and help people facilitate that, because we can really get the best out of the conversation, out of the connection, but out of that dynamic.
Dante, what's one of the best ways that you could kind of, I would say, articulate to all of our listeners today? Because we've never really taken this, perspective and diving into your history, but what's one of the ways in which you've had to kind of change who you've been in order to be successful? Like behind you, we've got a 2 Comma Club award winner from ClickFunnels. So, you're very successful. I want to know like a little bit about your personal journey as well.
My personal journey started when I felt just so anxious in meetings. And so I was like, okay, I got to do something about this, because if you want to run a company, you have to be really good around people. And so the start of it was going to improv. I started going to improv 2 to 3 times a week for 3 years, and honestly felt like a completely different person. At the same time, I was doing high ticket sales, so selling items, $50,000 plus on 1 or 2 phone calls. And you learn a lot about people, trying to get people to make big decisions relatively quickly. And so what I learned about myself personally was, as my skills increased, so did my confidence and belief in myself. And so really there was a deficit of skills. And as I just raised my skill level, I felt, more confident. It's like, how can you feel confident about something when your skill level's down here and your confidence is up here? Your confidence is always going to drive back down to where your skill level is. So that's been a big one. And then more on the, I don't know what word to use, but I did a lot of plant medicine as well, which is something that we never talked about on this podcast, but that has been just an eye-opening experience, to have doors in my mind that I didn't know existed, be illuminated through these experiences. And I went to the jungles in Peru, and I went to some ceremonies out here, and I joined a Native American church. It's just called a church because you need a legal umbrella to hold things in when you're doing things like that. And so it has been an amazing experience. Did ayahuasca, peyote with natives, and I've become a different person. As you expand your mind, you kind of have to. And so I had this Polaris star of like, hey, I want to be different. I want to understand people better. And I think that, Laura, you had some of the same desires. Like, you're a connector, you want to understand people. You have that psychology background as well. And everyone's journey of getting there is a little bit different. And that was just mine.
I think, entrepreneurship is a gift and a curse. It is a gift because you get out what you put in. It is a curse often because we have to look in the mirror and see some of our inefficiencies. I want to kind of understand a little bit of your mindset, Laura, when it turned into being an entrepreneur and building your business. Were there any like scary times that you kind of had to overcome in kind of reshaping the vision that you had of yourself? Because I know I love your background in psychology. I'm very interested in the version of self and understanding who we are. Do you feel like you had to really kind of break some of those molds that you were established with? Because I can imagine being an athlete your entire life, going to Harvard, you have certain expectations. You also kind of embody a certain persona. Do you think you've had to kind of shape shift a little bit in order to become this current version of yourself?
Good one. I hear Dante talk about in a word, transformation. In different ways, right? I think I definitely have transformed. I think I'm still transforming, I'm still evolving, I'm still growing. Learn in business, you are failing all the time, and you're learning from failures and mistakes. So this idea of embracing, I never really understood like embrace failure. I'm like, no, I want to win, and I want to be the best, and I want to get the grades and go to the thing and achieve the next hurdle. And the shift for me in terms of like, okay, the failures and the mistakes, and you make them as an entrepreneur on the daily, right? Are learning opportunities, and kind of shifting, you could say the growth mindset. I kind of always was a subscriber, believer to that, but it was different for me very specifically. Like, you have to be able and be okay and comfortable with discomfort, and learn from those mistakes and grow from them. And, be willing to, I think, the other transformation is in this notion that you cannot do it alone. I was, yes, I was a team player, and yes, I was, a collaborator, connector, but I always thought, okay, if I work harder, I can get this done. I can get that promotion. I can, do that thing. And when you're an entrepreneur, I started off by myself. I was a solopreneur for about 6 minutes. And then I very quickly realized, like, I don't actually know how to keep my books, or, design a website. I have a lot of ideas. I am a visionary. I do have a lot of ideas, but the execution, and the operations and the administration, all the things that are the mechanics of it to get the thing done, and then to think about standardizing it and growing it and scaling it, which we're doing today. I was not capable of doing that alone. So the two transformations for me, kind of that acceptance and leaning into, like, make the mistakes, learn from them, and this transformation into the space where, oh wait, there's no way I could do this alone.
It's so cool to be able to kind of hear how each of us in this brotherhood and sisterhood of entrepreneurship are all along this journey, and we're all taking different paths in order to get to the final destination. And it's just so cool to be able to kind of hear your origin story, some of the challenges that you've overcome, the mindset that's come along with it, the importance of brand, because a lot of people aren't paying attention to this today, but there's a few smart individuals who are really positioning themselves. As you were talking about earlier, you used a word in mobility. I thought that was really important. And I think about mobilities not only within our own organization, but it creates career mobility as well.
Exactly.
Because sometimes there is going to be a brand like Stryker. I'm not going to say anything negative about you guys, other than the fact that you smother people, that you don't want you guys to have a big brand. You know what I mean? But that turns into opportunities.
Is this just a campaign against this company? This is amazing.
No, it's front of mind to me because
we're probably going to cut all of it out, just...
Exactly. No, I mean, it's front of mind to me because they're a prime example of that. I mean, there are so many people who are amazing thought leaders and leverage their own brands on platforms like LinkedIn, but some of these brands are not okay with that thing happening. And it's interesting to me that we are going to have to look back at them in 5 years and say, you guys made really big mistakes because now you're trying to do this brand organically when you had the team members who were leading the way in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's a big brand mistake in my personal opinion. But as we kind of, land the plane here today, Dante, I want you to ask any final question that you have, and then we're going to give Laura an opportunity to ask our next guest a question as well.
Where can people find you, Laura? If anyone's interested in what we learned today, where can they find you? And just a shout out on your end.
Great. Well, I always appreciate that. So the corporate side, if you're working for an organization and curious to learn more about our leadership development solution, breakthroughbrands.com. So BREAKTHRU brands.com is a great place to start. And then if you would like to pick up a pre-order copy of my book, go to leadershiptypes.com. You can also click there to inquire about speaking events, workshops, all the good things that I love to do in my spare time, wink, wink, but those are the things that I really enjoy to do out in the world now that we're back traveling and all that good stuff. So leadershiptypes.com is kind of the place to get to the thinking and to book a time to talk more.
Well, beautiful. Well, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show. As part of our tradition, we'd love to be able to tie the episodes together. So if you could pose a question to our next guest, what would you like to ask them?
Well, very good. I wish I could picture them, but I will just imagine this figure. I just finished a great book. It's called The First Time Manager, DEI. So it's not a very sexy title, but I was picking it up, recommendation from a friend. So my mindset is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, even in spite of the backlash and the headwinds. So long way of saying the question is, what are you doing to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in your space, whatever that space might be, and share that with us.
Amazing. Well, thank you once again for everybody watching and listening today. Laura Barnard, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure in helping us share your story, the amazing work that you're doing at BREAKTHRU Brands, because I know that you're going to be behind some of the leadership that is going to be making a huge impact in our spaces over the next years. And so for Keenan Hart and Dante McLean, Laura, once again, thank you so much for joining the All Innovation AI podcast. Really appreciate it. That's a wrap.
Thank you both.